Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Fossil Friday Chats. I'm Brittany Stoneberg from the Western Science Center. With me, as always, is Gabriel Santos from the Alf Museum.
TGI Fossil Friday, everybody.
Yay! And joining us today is a guest I'm very excited about. Welcome to you, Dr. Mariana Di Giacomo. Welcome, Mariana. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh my goodness, we were admiring Mariana's background prior to going live because she works for the Yale Peabody Museum and they're undergoing some extensive renovations, aren't they?
Oh yeah. We are only beginning, if you must say, this crazy project, and it's absolutely amazing because it will bring us 50% more exhibit space and a ton of new opportunities for education and outreach. So I think it's going to be absolutely amazing.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
so exciting. I want to go.
That's when it. Are you going to talk about that in your talk before I ask questions about it?
No, but we can
Okay.
we can talk about it if you want
I
to.
was I was wondering when the reopening might be. Is it like next year or is it going to take a while?
Oh no, it's going to take a while.
Okay.
So, yeah, we are with COVID things were a little crazy. So it's 23, 24. That's what we're managing right now.
Okay. That'll give me
Awesome.
time to save up to come over.
Yep,
Exact.
same. Same. We'll just everybody write that into your vacation plans now.
Come to the opening of the Peabody. Yes.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, if you are not familiar with Mariana, you should be. She was born in Uruguay, where she did her undergrad and master's in paleontology. She then did a PhD in preservation studies at the University of Delaware, focusing on conservation of fossils, which I think is going to be the topic for today. Mariana is now the Natural History Conservator at the Yale Peabody Museum, where she cares for 14 million specimens from all the museum's divisions. That is very cool.
Uh-oh, I think Mariana's
I
frozen.
think, oh no, oh dear. Hello, everybody. It looks like we're a little bit frozen, so we're just gonna take a moment. So sorry for the technical difficulties. Let's see.
That's a terrible. That's a sad, unfortunate. Okay. Well, we'll see if she comes back in a second. Um,
Are we? Okay.
but that happens when you're doing live streaming sometimes.
Uh-huh. Definitely happens.
14 million fossils, is that what it said?
Yeah, 14 million.
Jeez.
I can't I can't conceive of that. Like we always boast that we have approximately a million individual specimens at the Western Science Center, and we're like, yay. Oh, there she goes. Okay, hopefully she'll rejoin and we'll be back.
All right. Well, we'll just keep talking until then.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, the Alf Museum, we like to say we have about 175,000 specimens, I
Mhm.
think, 100 that much in our collection. So, it's quite a bit for us, I would say sometimes, but
Yeah.
then 14 million specimens to think about as a conservator. That's
Oh my
crazy.
goodness. And having to move them all and then conserve them all and make sure none of them. Sorry, y'all. There was a fly right in front of me right at that moment. This is the stunning action that you get when we have technical difficulties. Um, yeah, our just having that many collections seems rather wild to me, and being able to protect all of those throughout not only a renovation but just in general is wow.
Well, when we were renovating the Alf Museum collections, we had to move everything out of the collections to put it into our downstairs exhibit hall, and that was a headache and a lot of anxiety on my part trying to figure
Uh-huh.
out how we are going to
The
move because
collection.
we didn't just move like specimens, we had to move like all of the what's it called, like all of the cabinets with the specimens inside, and so like trying to lay out that collection in our downstairs, that was quite a thing. But let me message Mariana and see if she's
Yeah.
doing okay. Give me
Yeah,
one
yeah.
second.
Give us one moment, everyone. Alrighty. Hopefully we can get her back. We were all so excited, and then technical difficulties beset us.
Be right back.
Okay. about that, y'all. But we are back. Mariana is back, and we are ready to dive into her presentation. Again, if you guys have any questions for Mariana, go ahead and put it in the chat. We will have a Q&A session afterwards. So, Mariana, whenever you're ready, take it away and tell us all about the skeletons in the closet.
And the goal for today is to talk about fossil conservation. And that's why I say that you should keep your skeleton in the closet, because keeping fossils in cabinets is the best way to preserve them. So first of all, I would want to introduce myself. My name is Mariana Di Giacomo. I am from Montevideo in Uruguay, a teeny tiny little country in South America. I am a paleontologist. I started my career as a paleontologist both in my undergrad and my master's. And then I came to the US to do a PhD in preservation studies focused on the conservation of fossils. And after that, I became the Natural History Conservator at the Yale Peabody Museum. And I'm a little bit of a goof, and I like to have fun in natural history museums. And so how did I get here? It all started with Jurassic Park. When I was a little kid, there were all these like magazines and stickers and all these, I don't know, merchandising associated with the movie. And one of the things were these magazines that were called dinosaurs. And my grandmother started buying all these magazines for brother, but he was too young to read. And so I grabbed them and I started reading them, and I was hooked. I really loved fossils and I wanted to become a paleontologist. So I told my mom, Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to be a paleontologist. And she was like, a what? And so I kept on reading and I kept on being interested, and I kept going, and I went to both my undergrad and my master's in the university in Uruguay. But during this time, I had the opportunity to take some workshops and internships in fossil preparation in the museum in La Plata, Argentina. And here you can see me right next to this saber-toothed cat, stunning. And that is to the right. It's the first fossil that I prepared ever. And I was literally brushing the teeth of this one. And so I was really, really excited about being in contact with the fossils, being able to work with them so closely. And I think that's when I really realized that I wanted to work with the fossils. But I was working on something much more theoretical back then, until I had the opportunity to work at this collection. It's called the Arroyo del Vizcaíno collection. And it is in a locality called Sauce in Uruguay. It's not sauce, it's Sauce, which means willow tree. And there I was able to do a bunch of research and outreach and teaching and field work. It was a little bit of everything. And it started changing what I wanted to do. And for example, when I was doing field work, the site was absolutely amazing. There were fossils everywhere. There was no place for you to stand that was not a fossil. And you can see all these people taking fossils, and that is actually the bottom of the stream. So in order for this to happen, there's big, huge logistics that have to occur. You have to dam the stream, you have to pump the water out, you have to save the fish. It's really, really complicated. But the prize was all of these amazing fossils in the bottom. It's just stunning. And as they were coming out, I was intrigued by some things that were going on. Like the fossils were changing colors, or if we didn't protect them soon enough, they were soaking wet, and so they would start to crack as they dried out. So I started asking myself a lot of questions about how to protect fossils and how can we do the work in which we have a fossil collection that is healthy. And part of my work was also doing preparation in this collection. And I started also finding out about which adhesives we should be using, which materials we should be using for our shelves or storage. And so all of these questions left me with that really, really big will to learn more about fossil conservation. And so I went to University of Delaware, and that's when I started moving into not only just the fossil conservation, which was part of my PhD, but also I did a little bit of teaching, and I did a lot of conservation of other natural history collections. And I was very lucky to have a 3-year fellowship at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, where I also did some of the research for my PhD and was able to work on some other natural history specimens and also do some other research of other topics that I was interested in other areas of conservation of natural history. And so I keep talking about conservation and conservation. So what is conservation? So it is that preservation of cultural property, which includes also natural history, into the future. And we have to examine things and document them and treat them if they need to be treated, but also prevent any issues that may happen in the future. And so the goal is to have all these objects and specimens for research and education into the future. So when people think about conservation, their minds instantly go to painting, because that is what is easier to see sometimes, that before and after effect. And so most people associate conservation straight with paintings, and sometimes with not such good conservation treatments. But if we talk about natural history conservation, we do preventive conservation, we do education and outreach, we do conservation treatment and research. And so one aspect that I also always like to include when I'm talking about conservation of natural history collections is the Society for the Preservation of Natural History Collections, which is a society that is interested in all aspects of this preservation. And they have this page that says why collections matter. And there's this very long list of how collections have an impact in a lot of different aspects of people's lives. And so they're important, for health issues. We know that nowadays with the pandemic, but also for the economy and trade and other issues as well. And so doing conservation, we are doing a service so that these collections can continue to have this impact that they have in everyday society. And so as I was saying, one of the aspects of conservation is education and outreach, which is what we're doing today. So it is one of the things that I really am excited about, to talk about the work that I do. But also we have preventive conservation. And what is preventive conservation is everything we do to try to avoid deterioration. We're not going to avoid it always. We're going to prevent it. We're going to slow it down if we can. There's no way to absolutely avoid everything. And preventive conservation has 3 major aspects, which are examination and documentation, and also the agents of deterioration or agents of change. When we're doing examination and documentation, what we're doing is we're looking at a certain object or specimen. If in case, of fossils, we're looking at these specimens and we're looking at how they are today. At the time that we are doing this examination, and we're documenting, are there any cracks? Are there any parts that are broken? Are there any repairs that have failed? Are there any areas that are discolored? So there are so many questions that we can ask. And here in these images, you can see me doing some examination and documentation for our renovation at the Yale Peabody Museum. And I was using an iPad and going around and marking any cracks or any issues that any of the fossils had. And this is perfect because it's like a snapshot of how things look right now. And so then you're going to do some work, or maybe it's going to go into storage for a while. And then when you take it out for doing something else, for example, another museum wants to borrow one of your specimens before it goes out on loan, we need to document how that specimen looks so that Once it goes on loan and when it comes back, we continue to document it and see if there were any changes. And it's important to do it at every stage because otherwise you don't know when those changes happened. And if you don't know when those changes happened, you don't know why they happened. And if you don't know why they happened, you can't do anything about it. So documentation, it's a very, very important aspect of preventive conservation, but also what I was talking about, the agents of deterioration or agents of change. And we're going to go quickly through all of them so you can start thinking about how things are so common and so normal in everybody's lives are a problem when trying to preserve fossils. And also, if you have a few fossils at home, you can start thinking what you can do to prevent their deterioration as well. So in the first place, we have pollutants. Pollutants are any substances and gases that are in the atmosphere that will interact with the fossils. For example, in this image that we have over here, we have a Nautilus shell that has this weird whitish, grayish, it looks like a powder, but it's actually an efflorescence. What's happening is that the calcium carbonate in the shell is experiencing degradation and deterioration because the cardboard, either if it's a box or it's an envelope, those things produce acids. And those acids with the shell, they will interact and they will produce what's called Fines disease. So if you have any fossils that have shells, be careful with where you store them, because if they have a lot of natural material, these things may start to happen. You'll start getting all this efflorescence, and it's not something that you can just brush off. It's stuck to the shell, so you can't remove it. And this also happens with wooden cabinets. Wooden cabinets have formaldehyde, and that is one of the reasons why some of these shells may deteriorate as well. Physical forces is another one of these agents. So anything from vibrations to hitting something to dropping it to an earthquake, all of these things are an issue and a problem when thinking about fossils, because, and actually, physical forces is one of the most common agents of deterioration in fossil collections. Because, for example, you have a bunch of fossils in a drawer, and you open the drawer, and those fossils start rattling in the drawer. Not only are they hitting the drawer bottom or the side or the front, but also they're hitting each other. And so this produces cracks and this produces areas of failure. And also, with a lot of fossils, they're so big and heavy that if they don't have support, they will collapse with their own weight. And so we try to avoid physical forces at every stage. And here in these images, you can see on the left, that is our Archelon, and it was being packed before transport. So you can see all this foam that is being wrapped all around it. And we have this Deinonychus in the middle image also being all wrapped and tied to all these different areas so that it didn't move and it wouldn't hit anything. And also on the right, we also have this specimen that was taken out of exhibit, and so that when we were rolling it out, the idea is that the head was it's very long, the neck, and it's kind of hanging, and so we did not want anything to either hit the head or any vibrations while we were rolling the specimen to weaken any of those joints in the neck and making the mount fail. And so that's when this tower, wooden tower, getting to the mandible was built, and then everything was also with foam, and we call this Tyvek, which is it's a fabric that is used for other things as well, like construction, but it's very soft and it can be in contact with the fossils without scratching them. Pests are a big problem in natural history collections, and even though pests won't eat a lot of fossils, we can have issues with labels, for example. So here you can see some mold on the labels, but also if, for example, we go to the field and we bring all these storage jackets and we open some of them, but then we're not able to do any preparation for a while, storage jackets are a perfect place for pests to have nests. So if you don't want any rats in your collection, you keep rats and mice away, and you keep everything clean so that no insects also are going to start nesting inside your jackets. And dissociation is another one of these agents. And it's one of also the most dangerous ones. So physical forces is the most common. And dissociation is, if not tied, it's very, very close for fossil collections, because when we collect a fossil, it has a lot of information that is associated with where we collected it, when we collected it, who collected it. So all of this information is associated with the fossil. If you separate the fossil from the information, from the data, then it's just an old shell, an old bone, an old leaf. So it's very important to keep the data associated. In the image of the left, you can see that something happened, and now there are all these labels on the floor, and we have no idea which label belongs to which fossil. Sometimes some of them are very easy to put back, but imagine you have the image on the right is the process that Research Casting International was doing when they were taking down all these ribs, and they were putting a label next to each, like tied to each one of these ribs. And so imagine if you had all these ribs, and then now all of a sudden the labels are everywhere. How do you know which rib is which? It's very hard when you have something like that. If you have a skull and then a femur and then the two labels, it's very easy. But when you have vertebrae or you have ribs, that becomes very challenging. So dissociation is one of the agents that we fear the most, because it takes the value out of our collections. We cannot use them as we were for research or for education, because now we have nothing to tell people. I have this fossil, I don't know where it came from, I don't know what it is of, and so that's not something good. And there's this other agent that's called thieves and vandal, and the name does not have these quotations. I add them because it's a name that is changing, especially with what people consider vandalism and other aspects of society. So I like to take this name of something that may evolve in the future. And it's very easy to understand. In the image of the left, you can see there was a mineral sample that someone sent somewhere, and someone read that it was a mineral sample and they stole it. And so now this research cannot be done because someone stole the sample. And in the image of the right, you can see it's a chalk incident. Someone decided to decorate this exhibit, and even though it's not a malicious act, maybe it was someone just being, trying to be funny or something. It is a problem because the exhibit then had to close, and then people had to clean all of that. And so it takes time and money from the staff. And then people that wanted to see that exhibit, they couldn't because it was closed while it was being cleaned. So some aspects may not have that malicious intent, but then the results and the consequences are negative for other people. Another aspect that is very important with collections is the radiation, either visible, UV, or infrared. And you can see me on the left taking some light measurements in our fossil halls before we started the install. So it all looks so very different. That my background is actually how it looked. I don't know if it was like last year. And this image was how it looked in December of 2019. So very, very different. But I was taking all these light readings and actually getting a really, really nice light reading. And because if you look at the image on the right, you will see me. This is when I was still in Uruguay. And I'm holding two bones from a ground sloth, the tibia and the fibula. And one day we were looking at all the tibiae and the fibula, and we were like, okay, which one's right and which one's left? Because when you look at a fibula, sometimes it's really hard to tell. The tibia, it's easy, but the fibula is sometimes a little hard. And so we were grabbing them and trying to articulate them to identify how to tell easily which one was right and which one was left. And this collection, the Arroyo de Vizcaíno collection, was excavated first in 1997 by high school students because there was this drought. And a lot of those fossils that they collected, they all went to the high school, and some of them were on exhibit for a while. And then we went, and then we got access to the site from 2011 on. So there was a big span of time and in which those fossils were on exhibit in that high school. And when we collected a lot of bones. The collection has now over 2,000 bones. And we were looking at all of these, and when you take these fossils from the ground, they are this very, very dark brown color, as you can see this tibia is. But the fossils that were on exhibit in the high school, some of them have bleached because of the sun. And so this fibula that actually belongs to this one, because you can see that at some point when they were collecting it in 1997, they mistakenly broke it off from this tibia, because in ground sloths, these bones may fuse as they age. So these are from the same individual, collected in 1997, and I believe this one is 2012. And look at the difference in color. It's absolutely incredible, and that is because these bones were exposed to high light levels, especially UV. However, visible light can produce a lot of damage as well. In infrared light, what it does is it's mostly heat. And so when you have a lot of IR, what happens is that you're accelerating chemical reactions. And that, of course, brings degradation faster. Another one is incorrect temperature and incorrect relative humidity. We talk about them together because as one changes, the other one changes as well. And what is the thing is that it's the incorrect one. It's not necessarily that it is only too high or too low, but fluctuations are also a problem. And you can see in this image off the left that these fossils have what's called Pyrite's disease. They have pyrite, unstable pyrite in them. And when these are exposed to a higher humidity, which sometimes is not even that high, 20 or 30% relative humidity can already start this reaction, and you end up with a pile of dust. We no longer have the fossil. So this is a big, big problem, because you may have a beautiful collection, but if they have, all the fossils have this pyrite disease, you need to stop it, which you won't be able to do, because once the reaction occurs, you can't stop it. You can slow it down, but you can never stop it. So that is something to pay attention to. Fire, of course, is an awful agent of deterioration, and we all have that big, awful memory of what happened in Brazil. And of course, one of the things that is the most needed when you have a fire is water, which is also an agent of deterioration. And in fossils, we only think about fossils. Water can affect a lot of things. It can make fossils swell. It can make adhesives fail. It can erase some labels. And of course, if water is present for a while, we can also have molds and start having other pests and other issues as well. So how do we prevent these things from happening? For example, we have these gorgeous archival materials in storage. So we can produce these jackets, storage jackets, that will protect the fossils from, for example, the physical forces. And also, once they're closed, they will buffer anything that's going on outside. So if there are changes in relative humidity or temperature, these storage jackets will buffer that a little bit as well. So using the correct material, it's very, very important when you're thinking about preserving the fossil. In fossil collections, the hazards that we may encounter are, for example, radon gas. That's why we have this little Geiger counter over here. Knowing if your collection has any radiation issues is very important to protect yourself, because fossils, they're very important for research and outreach, but your health is more important. So knowing your hazards is also very important when you're working with fossils. And preventive conservation is also done in exhibits with cleaning cases or designing the exhibits so that you are considering all these aspects of preventive conservation, so that when the fossils are on exhibit, you will be able to clean them whenever they need cleaning, or use something like silica gel to prevent fluctuations in relative humidity and other things like that. And as I was saying, conservation is also about conservation treatment. And the treatment is, let's say we have this collection and we do all we can with preventive conservation to protect it, but sometimes things happen. And if things happen, we need to intervene. We need to do treatment. So it's something that we do to a specimen to make it cleaner, or to make it look better if it's going to go on exhibit and you want to tell a story. You sometimes don't want certain cracks, or if it's in two parts, you want to put it together so that you can actually communicate, how that shape was of that fossil when it was part of either the animal or the plant, etc. And sometimes you want to stabilize something for education purposes so people can handle it and have a great educational experience where they're learning a lot. And so if something is not stable, that is more complicated because you cannot reach those educational goals. And here's an example of a treatment that I did also in Uruguay. So on the left is how this Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat tooth, the fang, how it looked when we took it out of the containment it was in when we took it from the field. And in the image on the right, you can see how it looked after I was done with it. So treatment has, you need to be very patient and you need to know what you're doing. So sometimes if you don't know what you're doing, it's better to contact an expert or talk to someone that can help you deal with that treatment that you need done, because the consequences of doing poor treatment sometimes are worse on the specimen than not doing anything. And I was lucky while I was at the Smithsonian to have the opportunity to use lasers for research and for cleaning. And here is a gorgeous fossil that is in this lab. And the fossil preparator, he had been removing all this white residue that was applied to the slab, so that it would look more like the seafloor or something like that. And it was taking forever to remove all this. It was a mix of plaster and sand and paint. And we had the laser for a while, and I was like, what if we try to clean this with a laser? And it sounds very futuristic, but actually it looked absolutely amazing. It took us a total of 5 hours to clean this whole huge slab. And he had been working on it for weeks. And it was just such a cool experience to be able to do laser treatment on fossils. And another aspect, as I was saying, about conservation is doing research. The one thing that I like to do is to know about glues. And here in these photos, you can see some examples of some glues that I found when we were taking down the fossils, that actually all these dinosaurs that you can see behind me in the background from the Yale Peabody Museum, as they were taking them down. And some of them were taken to Canada with Research Casting International to prepare them and remount them for exhibit. And as I was looking at what they were doing, I was there with my scalpel and my little vials, going in and taking samples of all these different glues, because I was fascinated to see all these different things that they had used from the early 1900s until maybe the 60s or the 70s when they had placed the last specimens in the halls. So I want to thank everybody for inviting me, and I was very, very excited to be here, and I will take any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Thank you, Mariana.
That was so cool. Lasers for
Yeah.
fossil conservation? I need to
I
look
had no
into that for
idea.
myself.
Gonna get some lasers in your collections, Gabe?
If I if I can, heck, I want to shoot lasers at fossils to see if I can clean them that way.
Yeah.
I would say, however, that other research that I did was not as successful. So it's something that you really, really have to be careful. And one thing that I did, it was in a teeny, teeny, tiny little sample that it was from a dinosaur bone, or they think it was dinosaur because it was very, very tiny. They didn't know exactly what it was. And I went with a laser, very, very low setting. I wasn't blasting it or anything. And if you look at it, it's like, it's fine. Nothing happened. I didn't clean it. Nothing happened. But then I looked at it with the electron microscope, and maybe I am the first person in this whole world to have melted hydroxyapatite.
You
So,
built. Wow.
Oh,
yeah,
wow, Mariana. A legacy.
exactly. My legacy is a fossil bone. And
Oh
it's
my
funny because when you
gosh.
look at it, nothing happened, but microscopically, it was melted. So I'm like, maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, it still would be cool to be able to say I experiment with fossils for fossil conservation. That seems pretty fun if you ask me.
Yeah, just
Well,
use
it
the
was. It was a lot
lasers.
of fun. And I look forward to doing more of that after our renovation because right now we're like full on working on the renovation. So I'm really excited to be able to do more of that after.
Yeah, that kind of leads into one of my questions. You know, you are working on a very large, full-scale renovation right now. Like, what are some particular challenges of having to do your work as a conservator while you're moving all of these items and whatnot while doing a full-scale museum renovation? What is that like?
Well, I've been looking into cloning myself.
You just need
Well,
multiple of you.
yeah. I mean, in one way, this is awful, but COVID helped us in a way because a lot of loans were stopped. Museums were not loaning things to each other, and there were not all these exhibits opening in all these other museums that they were asking for our specimens. And so in that sense, part of my work was stopped. I worked on a loan like a month ago for the first time. So that was something that was positive in the sense that I did not need to do so many things at the same time. Um, but I think the challenges are um, timing mostly because you're taking out all of these fossils, and some of them went to Canada with Research Casting International, and some of them are here, and our preparators are working on them. And so you have all of that, and then as I was going and documenting each one of them, you have to do the work in the database and upload all that information, and then we have to start thinking about the exhibits that are coming, how we're going to redesign them, and do we need silica gel for the cases, do we need which fossils are more delicate than others, can this fossil go on exhibit or is it too delicate, and if we put it there we're going to lose it in a few years. So we have to think about all of those things. And then in the other end, when install comes, I'm going to have to do also these like condition checks before things are remounted. So it is a very, very long process, and it's still very exciting because knowing that you were able to complete a project of this size is just absolutely amazing.
Hmm.
That's got to be like a whole different mindset you put yourself in, like trying to prepare like at the Western you've got an amazing collections person with Darla. At the Alf
Mhm.
Museum, our amazing collections person's Bailey is so methodical and like knows what we're gonna do. But for you, Mariana, because you switched sort of from like paleontology to fossil conservation, is there like a switch in mindset in the way you think about fossils when you change
Yes,
that?
definitely. One of the things that I still, when thinking about my mind as a paleontologist, for example, if you have a fossil and you want to do some research on it, you may want to do some sampling. You go and you take all these samples. And as a conservator, I'm like, wait, well, maybe not that many. So kind of change your mind a little bit in the sense of yes, you want to do research, so yes, you can take a sample. But what if someone wants to do research on a technique that we don't even know will exist in 50 years? Don't take the whole thing. Leave a little bit for someone else. So once I was told that was probably one of the very few paleontologists focused on the future, which was it's an interesting way of seeing it. Because there are a lot of paleontologists working with like climate change and other things are, they're thinking about the future, but thinking about the future of the collection itself, um, it's definitely a different mindset.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Like when you're doing collections work, you're thinking about who's going to work on this, the next generation of paleontologists. Will these fossils be available for folks to look at in the same way, so they can either replicate the data, like you said, new techniques or something? So it definitely is like, we are more future thinking than I would say than a lot of other paleo folks in our field. So I like that.
And also, the public, so they deserve to look at things in 50, 100 years too. So
Absolutely.
um, we want to be able to share all of this knowledge and these beautiful collections with them as well, even if they haven't been born yet.
I know as doing outreach and collections, I'm torn sometimes because I'm like, I want to bring this fossil out, and then I'm also like, I know I shouldn't because if I move it, this will be the last time we ever move it. So it's such a like a decision. Like, oh, one day we'll find a way
It's a
to let
trade-off,
people see it.
definitely a trade-off.
Alrighty, there's a great question from Dr. Bernard Means. Hi, Bernard. Archaeological conservation has many of the same issues. Do you find overlap at the Yale Peabody, such as sharing of practices with archaeological collections?
Yes, definitely. So right now I am the conservator for the whole museum, not for the fossil collections. So I deal with archaeological remains and taxidermy and botany and everything. And so the practices are essentially the same, and then you tailor each one of your approaches for specific things that may be a little different. Like if you have pyrite disease, that is not a fossil that you just put on a shelf or in a cabinet and you just close the door. You need to do something to reduce the humidity, to reduce the oxygen in that container so that you stop that, slow down that issue. And with archaeological remains, it's the same. Physical forces is a huge issue. If you have very old pottery, it's very easy to break. But if you also have Egyptian collections, light levels may be very damaging to the beautiful pigments that are present in Egyptian either mummies or other objects. And so there is a lot of overlap. And we actually have a lot of overlap with art collections or historical collections. So conservation is a mindset in which um, what you try to do is to slow the deterioration, which is normal because, when an animal dies or, when a leaf falls, the normal and natural thing is for it to degrade and things to go back into the cycle. And we're stopping that. We're like, no, please don't degrade. Stay with us so that people can look at you in 100 years.
It's an interesting way of putting it that like your actual job is to stop natural forces just standing in the way of nature and be like, nah, not today.
We look to the future. We look to the future by stopping time, basically, for these fossils.
Ooh, that
That's
is
good.
a
I'm gonna put that
great,
on a
that's a
T-shirt.
good, yes, put that on your business card. Awesome. Awesome. This is a good question, and it might be our last one for today. This is from Bailey at the Alf, who's also in collections. What's the specimen you've conserved that you've enjoyed the most or are the most proud of?
Well, I think it's that Smilodon fang that I was showing you, that before and
It was
after.
beautiful.
It took me, so that one I think was also, it's very dear to my heart because I was still learning a lot then. I'm still learning today because, it's just how these professions go. You're always learning. But back then, I was self-taught. I had had no classes in conservation. I had had nothing because in Uruguay there is no conservation career. There's nothing like that. That's why I had to come to the U.S. to do my PhD because there was no way for me to do conservation in Uruguay. And so I was reading all of this and learning about paraloid B72 as an archival adhesive that you can use because it has great properties and it won't yellow over time and all of that. And paraloid B72 does not exist in Uruguay. There's no place to buy it. And so we had to travel to Argentina to get it with a letter from the dean because we were coming back and crossing international borders with these transparent pellets in a bag. And like, no, this is fine. This is chemicals. And so it had so much. It was such a good learning experience for me. So it wasn't just that it took me forever to do because I had to clean every teeny tiny little part, but also you are in such close contact with that fossil that um, I am one of the very few that saw actually the nerve canal inside that fang because I glue it back together so nobody now can see it. But it's one of those, it's very intimate when you're doing this kind of work. And I took a lot of photos, so those photos exist and other people can see them, but it's not the same. So I think this one was the one that I enjoyed the most because of that.
That's awesome. I
That's
love
so
those kind of
cool.
stories. It's one of the cool things about working in collections. You get to see things a lot of folks don't get to see, and sometimes you're the first person to see it in maybe 100 years or so. So
Or
that's one of my favorite part.
30,000 or ever.
Yeah, or millions of years even. Well, that does it for questions, right, Britt?
Yep, we're good.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and thank you, Mariana, for joining us today on Fossil Friday Chats. Um, when we leave the show, do you have a bit of advice for anyone who might be interested in pursuing conservation specifically?
Yeah. I think you really, really have to love collections. That's the first thing. And it may sound, corny but actually you do so much work, sometimes without even touching the collections, especially all this preventive work, that you really have to be engaged with all of this and start thinking about all these different aspects. And the other thing is um, it's always good also to start thinking about your own stuff at home. Where am I putting this beautiful art that I have on my wall? Is it a wall that receives a lot of sun? Is it right above the radiator, which is really hot? And so start thinking about how you can care for your own stuff and you develop that kind of love for culture and collections in general. And I think that that's very, very useful for you to start developing this conservation mind.
Awesome. That made me
Awesome.
think about where I'm putting some of my collector's items,
I
so I should
I
probably think about that
looking
really quick
looking
today
around
after
looking
this.
around at some of my artwork on my walls.
And also, really quick, shout out to all the collections folks like Darla, Bailey, our preparators at collection and museums, because there are a lot of the folks who work behind the scenes to make sure that the science happens.
Yeah.
So next time you're in a museum or whatever, make sure you thank your local collections conservation person in there, because they do the hard work to make sure the science gets done.
Definitely.
All right. Well, that does it for today's episode. Thank you, Mariana, for that awesome
Thank you.
presentation. And thank you so much to all of our audience. As always, if you like this program and want to support programs like it at the Alf Museum and the Western Science Center, you can find links on how to do that in the description below. Thanks to the Paleontological Society, who is now funding the Fossil Friday chats. And if you like this show, please make sure you like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Twitch for more stories from the world of paleontology. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.